You can make it into the disease as the problem, and then what you end up with is symptomatic medicine, is treating the symptoms because we don't really know what's going on. My understanding is that those symptoms and signs is the voice of the body asking for help. For example, if a person comes in with a bladder infection, well, one of the questions that I'll be asking the person is, what in your life are you pissed off with? So that's what healing is about for me. It's something's making a noise in the body. What is this noise trying to tell me about the body? What is the noise trying to tell me about the person? And how deep does a person want to go? And to my absolute astonishment, I started to see miracles happen. People with diabetes disappeared. People with rheumatoid arthritis, the arthritis disappeared. And to be quite honest, I was dumbfounded.
Greetings, seekers of ancient wisdom. Here find teaching to enter God's kingdom. Natural ways, that is what we uncover, to live life aligned, sister and brother. Here we are ready to speak with Dr. Brom, a holistic healer he's a medical trained from. Sees the person as the entire whole dome. He has learned how to bring your wellness home. So sit back and chill and get comfortable. We will tell you how illness is manageable. Through some cool, entertaining fables, we will teach you how everyone's able. Wellness is your birthright, if I can say. Listen to your body and delay the gray. Now that my lyrics are out of the way, Dr. Brom, we are here and ready to stay.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm all here.
So this is the second show we're doing together. The first one we spoke about the principles of natural medicine, which I thought was really insightful. You know, we spoke about understanding the body, seeing the body as a whole system, and giving the body the nutrients and vitamins that it needs, and let the body do the healing. So we're following up today on how people today can manage illness, right? And what is the process that they can go through? What is your opinion of a good process that they can go through to manage illness? Because a lot of people are living with illness at the moment.
Okay, so the first thing we need to correct is your statement around the question of the body. We're not dealing with the body. The body is matter, and as Max Planck, the Nobel physicist, said, you know, I've been studying matter all my life, and I can tell you one thing about matter: there's no such thing. There's only energy information, and behind energy information, there is a consciousness or some intelligence that we don't understand. So when we look at the body, we need to recognize, because what medicine did was to take hold of this body and said, okay, here's disease in the body. Let's open up this body and see if we can find out exactly what's going on. And so when they started to take the body apart and examine the different parts of the body, they discovered there were cells, that the basic building block of this so-called matter body was cells. And then they broke the cells open. And then they discovered there was atoms. And then they broke the atoms open and discovered there were particles. And particles is not matter. Particles is energy information. So when you go deeper and deeper into the body, what you come to is not more matter. You come to actually energy information. And if you go deeper into the energy information, you discover that it's so complex, that it's so astonishingly put together, that there has to be some kind of intelligence operating right behind it all. So when we're talking about a human being, we have to be careful. We're not talking about a body. We're talking about a human being, and a human being is matter, energy, information, quantum, and body, emotions, mind, spirit, consciousness. So we're talking about something much bigger. So when we're talking about ill health, we have to be careful, because the conventional medical model has shrunk the human being into this package that it can handle, that it can measure, and it can control. And that part of it is the body. And that part of it is only the physical aspects of the body which can be measured. All the rest is regarded as subjective, as epiphenomena, is of no interest at all. The only thing of interest is that which can be measured by science. And there's good reason for that, is because the part which they can measure and weigh and see is the part that they can feel in control of. All the rest is unknown. And the fact is that there's much more unknown than there is known. So when we're talking about ill health from a medical perspective, we're talking about a very, very, very small part of the human being. And that's the so-called the disease model. That's the machine model. But human beings are not machines. And human beings are only apparently made of matter. You know, we get stuck on this physical body, and everybody's busy walking around showing off their physical body as if that's who they are. That's not who they are. That's not what you are. You're not a body. You're a human being. And a human being is matter, energy, information, body, emotions, mind, spirit. So we need to encapsulate this whole package when we starting to talk about ill health. Because where is this ill health that we're talking about? So the conventional medical model has reduced it to matter which can be measured. So when we talk about the disease, we're talking about a very, very small part of what the problem is about. Because the problem is not, in a kind of way, not the disease. You can make it into the disease as the problem, and then what you end up with is symptomatic medicine, is treating the symptoms because we don't really know what's going on. We haven't a clue about this whole complexity, this amazing being that we are. You know, we reduced it to matter. And that's the trouble of the conventional medical model. It's based on a matter which can be measured, only that part of it which can be measured. And disease is a nice model for them because it can be put into a test tube, it can be measured, and then you can try and treat it. You're not healing the person because the person is matter, energy, information, body, emotion, mind, spirit. So we're not healing the person, we're treating the physical aspects of the person as if the problem is physical. And it's not. The problem is much, much deeper. Am I making sense here?
Yeah, no, that's perfect sense, and thanks for bringing that to our attention and the importance of that. And I kept thinking of this image, of the electromagnetic spectrum, and I'm going to put that on the screen for our viewers to see. But the electromagnetic spectrum, from a few hundred meters wavelength to tiny nanometers. If you look at what we can actually see, what is all visible light, it's like a tiny little sliver of that whole electromagnetic spectrum, and that's all the colors. So you can think from violet all the way to red and all the mixtures in between, everything that we can register with our eyes is such a tiny little sliver of that whole actual spectrum. And that spectrum is infinite, right? So we're actually blind. If you think about it, all we can see is a tiny sliver. And it's the same with the body. The physical is just a tiny sliver of what the entire body actually is because of our mind, our emotions, our soul, all those things. But the physical body is just a tiny little sliver. And the doctors, based on that little sliver of information of the whole, they see some symptoms. They're like, oh, we see some symptom over here. Okay, something's happening. Um, person's got too much, or insulin's not being absorbed. So we see some diabetes. So we call it diabetes. This information that we pick up from this little sliver of of information that we have access to, right? And then we treat that symptom, completely oblivious to the whole spectrum, right? The whole spectrum that they have no information on. And this is why I've sort of started appreciating alternate health and alternate approaches, because a lot of them that are holistic, like you said, are looking at the person as a whole. If you look at the Vedic system, Ayurvedas, and the whole Vedic system of wellness and healthcare, they go very deep into the mind and the emotions and, exercise and being aware of the food, the times that you eat and how you feel when you eat. They've put a lot of emphasis on the whole, because I think they've understood that the human is more than just the physical. So, Dr. Brom, I'm eager to hear, how do you treat someone that has got symptoms, that is, that's living with physical symptoms, right? You understand that the physical symptoms is just one part of their whole being. How do you go around helping them to manage it now? And maybe we can use some case examples if you want.
So one needs to understand that the patient comes into you with symptoms and signs. And my understanding is that those symptoms and signs is the voice of the body asking for help. So ill health is the voice of health asking for help. Health doesn't make a noise. If you're completely healthy, there's no noise going on. You feel at peace with the world. You feel good. You've got energy. Your head's clear. Your digestion is good. Appetite is good. There's no noise going on. So when a noise comes about, one must be careful of separating it off. Like, oh, now the person's got a disease. It's not quite like that at all from my perspective. My perspective is that the symptoms and signs is the body asking for help. Now, that's a different way of dealing with the things and a different approach to what you're looking at. So when a person comes in with symptoms and signs, the question that I'm asking, well, there are a number of questions that come up for me. Firstly is, what are the symptoms and signs talking about? So let me give you some example. For example, if a person comes in with a bladder infection, well, one of the questions that I'll be asking the person is, what in your life are you pissed off with? If the person is having difficulty with the throat, then I'll ask him, okay, what in your life are you not able to swallow? If you've got problems with your hands, is what are you not handling well in your life? So you must understand that we're dealing here not with a unintelligent system. We're dealing with an astonishing system, and the system is asking for help. So at what level do you need to enter into this whole process? So symptoms and signs are the body's core. It's like the example that I often use is, if you've got a show going on and people are sitting watching the show. Well, if everybody's sitting quiet watching the show, you can actually hear what's going on. But if three people stand up and make a noise, suddenly everything is disrupted. It sounds like the whole audience is involved, because they are. So when there's symptoms and signs in the body, suddenly there's a noise. Well, what do you do with the five people that are making a noise? You don't tell them to shut up, because they're just going to make a noise. There's a good reason why they're making a noise. So you've got to start to have an inquiry with them and find out exactly what's going on. So at the end, they sit down. So that's what healing is about for me. It's something's making a noise in the body. What is this noise trying to tell me about the body? What is the noise trying to tell me about the person? And how deep does a person want to go? Not everybody wants to go deep into this. A lot of people just come to you, they just want to get rid of their symptoms and signs. So they're happy to take drugs. I'm a non-drug doctor. So for me, if a person just wants to take drugs, please go to the doctor down the road. We'll give you drugs. I'm not interested to treat the symptoms, which is the voice of health, and shut that voice down by giving pain pills or antidepressants or proton pump inhibitors or whatever. That's not the job that I do, because I know that all that those drugs are doing is shutting the voice off of health. The voice of health is asking for help. Please help. Well, if you shut that voice down, the body's intelligence will say, hang on, you can't do this to me, and will find another way to express itself, because it has to continue doing what it's doing. The body's highly intelligent. It's, as I said, it's matter, energy, information, consciousness. We're dealing with something that understands what's going on. The body is not the body is highly complex, and there has to be some integrative intelligence which is operating behind it all. So for me, it's asking, okay, intelligence, I know that you're asking for help here. What are you trying to say? And in what way can I help you? So that's the kind of question that I would be asking. And it doesn't make any difference what the name of the disease is, because the name of the disease is only a name of pathology, because doctors can only give it a pathological diagnosis. But pathology, as I said, is the matter problem. What about the energy problem? What about the informational problem? What about the quantum problem? Because, the deeper you go, the more you find connections to things around you. Like the more traditional tribes. When a person is sick, the person is sick for the whole tribe. It's not just suddenly happening to the person only. The person is connected to the tribe. So the tribe, the imbalance, whatever's present in the tribe, is manifesting through that person. We are not, let me just connect you to the bigger picture, because I've done a paper on the power of prayer, for example. We know that prayer can have an influence on somebody at the other end of the world. Well, if prayer can make a difference and connect to somebody else, where do you begin and end as a person? If my prayer can influence somebody somewhere else in another part of the world, then where do I begin and end as a human being? At what level are you going to put brakes on me? So all I'm pointing to here is that, the electromagnetic recording of the heart, the ECG, can be picked up 1 meter outside the body. 1 meter outside the body. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody at the other end of my table over here, my electromagnetic field of my heart is connecting to his electromagnetic field of his heart, because it's also extending 1 meter outside the body. So while I'm having a head-to-head conversation, our hearts are having a heart-to-heart conversation that's flowing at the same time. So what I'm pointing to here is the incredible magnificence of what we are as a human being. We're not inside our bodies. Our bodies are inside us. I'm going to repeat that. We're not inside our bodies. Our body's inside us. I extend outside my body, at least 1 meter outside my body. But as I said, the power of prayer can influence another person at the other end of the world. And quantum science has already shown this to be true. So it's not that, we even got scientific proof of the fact that at the particle level, particles connect with other particles. It's called Bell's theorem, and they've proven it to be true. That we are connected in an astonishing way to other beings around us. We are not bodies. We are systems in activity. We are systems in flow. That's what we are. And this whole concept of being a body and somehow we're inside the body, there's no proof of that. You try and find the soul or the spirit or the I am or any of these things inside the body, they're not there. Science hasn't shown that. But all spiritual practices have gone in that direction thousands of years. The whole teachings of the Buddha was teachings of the nature of who we are as energy beings. So the whole purpose of meditation is the recognition of the mind, and the mind is not the brain. This whole idea that somehow the brain and the mind are the same thing is nonsense, because it's never been shown to be true. So we are electromagnetic beings, and so when we're talking about the management of ill health, we have to see that it's much bigger. It's much more broader than just treating a symptom. Treating a symptom is based on an object, a matter being, that somehow the human being is a body of matter. And there's no proof of that. That we are this, we're not this body. The body is inside us. The body is the mechanism that the energy information uses in order to operate in the world. I brought up a lot of ideas now, but now we can start to look at this whole question of how do we manage ill health. Well, once we have a broader concept of what we're dealing with, and that's why when I teach medical doctors what I call Brom's rule number one. Brom's rule number one. What is Brom's rule number one? Brom's rule number one is change the patient's story. For me, that's the most important thing you can do in a consultation. Doesn't make any difference what the disease is. The disease immediately puts it into this box. I have this disease. Well, that's not true. You have physiological dysfunction. That would be true. But to say you have a disease, we have to be careful with these disease names, because a disease name is usually a disease of pathology. And as I keep pointing out, we are not matter. We are matter, energy, information. And the disease label tells us nothing about the energy information. It tells us nothing about the human being. And the human being is walking into my room and saying, I'm not well. And now we give it a pathological diagnosis of the body's matter problem. And that's not, we're dealing with the matter, energy, information. All I'm saying is that, then you got to ask, well, where are the controls? Because once we understand where the controls are, then we can start to go deeper in our management. So the question of controls is interesting, because physiology or biochemistry moves at centimeters a second. There's absolutely no way there can be a coordinated management of the whole system at centimeters a second. That's much too slow. Light moves at 300,000 kilometers a second. 300,000 kilometers a second. Physiology moves at centimeters a second. So where are the controls going to be? Not in physiology, not in biochemistry. That's much too slow. You've got billions of cells. Every single cell has to have, within the heart cell, itself, there are 300 mitochondria inside the cell, 300 mitochondria. The cells are minute. You need powerful microscopes to see a single cell, and in every cell, 300 mitochondria plus all the other different organelles, and they all have to be has to have food, toxins taken out. There's no way that moving at centimeters a second, you're going to have that kind of control. You need something with instantaneous control, instantaneous transfer of information. Well, even electromagnetic might not be fast enough. But we need instantaneous communication. And that instantaneous communication can only happens at the quantum level. That's why these quantum computers work so well, because they move information almost instantaneously. Now that's the level that we need to look for the controls at that depth, at the level of the depth where there's instantaneous communication. And that is the quantum level. And now we're starting to see that consciousness operates at that level as well. So now we're beginning to recognize where the controls are. The controls have to be not in the physical body. It's not hormones. That's a joke to think that it's hormones. Hormones move much too slow. At the electromagnetic field, probably, and that's why the Chinese and acupuncture work so well, because it's operating at the energy level. So the ancient Chinese practitioners knew that they didn't even know about physiology. They didn't need to know about physiology, because the whole basis of their education is based on energy, and even their herbs. If you study the herbs of Chinese medicine, they move energy. That's how they talk about the herbs, moving yang, yin, balancing the different energy fields. So even their herbs were involved in energy balancing. And then, of course, the acupuncture needles. So, and then even go deeper than that. What's a deeper level than electromagnetic is consciousness. And that's why Brom's rule number 1, change the patient's story. Because I know that if I can change the story, because everybody walks into my room with a negative story. They got a disease that's going to kill them. They're unhappy and they got all kinds of emotional trouble and stress. So changing the patient's story is, for me, the most important thing that I can do. I will spend the whole of my consultation, my first consultation, is changing their story. It's like I often tell people, if you can choose to be an optimist or a pessimist, but it's stupid to be a pessimist, because you're going to feel pessimistic. And every single cell in your body is going to be surrounded by the chemistry of pessimism. So that's not helpful at all. So you have no choice but to be an optimist. And if you're going to be an optimist, you still have 2 choices. You can be a conditional optimist. If things get bad enough, you become a pessimist. Or you can be an unconditional optimist. Well, you have no choice but to be an unconditional optimist because it's stupid to be anything else. If you're a conditional optimist, you're going to somewhere along the way, if things get bad enough, you'll just become a pessimist again. So in real terms, we have absolutely no choice in terms of healing ourselves and our body and our life to be an unconditional optimist. Absolutely unconditionally. Doesn't make any difference what's happening. So yeah, I mean, I was reading a book the other day of a child that was born without arms and legs. I've forgotten his name now, but he's now on the circuit teaching people how to be optimistic. No arms and legs. On the cover of the book, have you seen the cover of his book? He's on a surfboard. Yeah, he's famous now because he's written books and yeah, he's become a real evangelist, so he carries the God story around with him all the time, and it's okay. I'm not. It's not a question for me whether you believe in God or not believe in God. It's a question of how you're using your mind. If believing in God helps you to be an optimist, an unconditional optimist, that's perfect. Uh, but you don't have to believe in God to be an unconditional optimist. It's just common sense. So, promise rule number one for management of ill health: change the patient's story.
Raised some really fascinating points, and I always found the conventional medical system a bit inverted. And now when you say it like really makes sense that it's a bit inverted because the symptoms in the physical body, the symptoms that everyone is treating, the physiological dysfunction, right? You go to the doctor and he switches off that voice. You're saying the ill health is the voice of the body calling for help. The body is saying, please, please help me. And they're sending some alarm out into the physical world, right? Because we're not able to connect consciously or electromagnetically. So they have to speak through the physical world. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor shuts off that voice. He's like, nah, keep that voice down. And he gives you something. And then people end up on chronic medication. So this has dawned on me is what chronic is a constant shutting off of that voice. So the person can continue on their day. And this sounds so inverted, right? Like it's not at all treating the person, bringing them to health. It's not at all wellness. It's actually, if they know what they're doing, I don't know if they know what they're doing. Maybe they're just doing what they do. But if they do know what they're doing, it's actually evil, right? Because the problem is going to persist, and like you said, the voice is going to come out in some other way in the body, and maybe that's what we're seeing: people ending up with multiple conditions, etc., etc. Then you raised the other interesting point, about the West, I mean, sorry, the old ancient teachings, being aware of consciousness and treating the energy body. Acupuncture, you mentioned, right? Acupuncture, they use these needles and they put it into specific energy points in the body. There would be junction points of the meridians. So the meridians is a name we give to the subtle energy system or the channels of subtle energy through the body. And those needles would go into like specific energy points or meridian junctions. And somehow that would, and they knew that would work with the energy body, stimulate the energy body to do work or change. So they knew that healing actually begins in the higher energy body. They would not even treat the physical body, like you said, right? The acupuncturist doesn't even treat the physical body. They go straight to the higher energy body and treat that. And they know when that is working better and working well, the physical body would follow, and the symptoms in the physical world would then also reduce. So that was brilliant. Step one of Dr. Brom's managing disease was really brilliant. Get the person to change their story. So what is step two? We're really eager to hear.
Yeah, so once you've changed the story, you already set the ground for shifting. Because when you change the story, you're not just changing, you're not changing you're changing the person. Because the moment you shift the story, a lot of things start to shift. People don't realize the power of changing the story. I mean, I often use the example of how my hand goes up, and I don't know how to lift my hand up. I don't know what muscles to use. I don't know what blood vessels. I don't know any of the chemistry involved. All I know is how to think. I think my hand, please go up, and my hand goes up. So that's the power of our thinking. You without even knowing what to do, you can still walk down the road, which is a total miraculous thing to do. You're not doing it. All you thinking is about doing it, and yet it manifests into the body. So I mean, I think that everybody knows. There's very few people that comes into my room that don't recognize that stress has an influence on them. That stress could be the main cause of their illness. Because what happens when you're stressed is your body's stressed. It's manifesting into your body. And that's why we love sitting in coffee shops and watching people walk past. If it was just robots walking past, it would be less interesting to human beings. Human beings are magical. We love watching human beings walk around because what we're seeing is not just a body. We're actually seeing the beingness of a person. We don't realize how our sensory apparatus is much bigger and magnificent than we think. You must remember that what you're looking at outside you is all passing through your senses into your brain. So the tree that I'm looking at outside me now, the photons have to go through my eyes to the nerve processes up into my brain to the visual cortex. And in the visual cortex, I'm seeing the tree. I'm not really seeing the tree outside there. I'm seeing the tree that's appearing in my mind. So if it's appearing in my mind, well, can I not influence the way I'm seeing the tree? Of course I can. And that's why different people looking at trees in a different way see different things. So we are artists of life. We are creative beings of life. Our mind is able to manifest all kinds of things in our life. I can heal somebody at the other end of the world. I can, by being positive, I can influence positive chemicals in my body. So we need to understand that level. And sorry, I've gone back to the story and how important is the story. So what is the next level? The next level is, I think, lifestyle management. When I started my practice, I knew very, very, very little actually of treating disease in a more natural way. All I knew was that I'd decided to become a non-drug doctor. I might have mentioned it in my first talk, but and what I started to do, because I knew very, very little, is I was given a sheet, a cleansing diet sheet by a naturopathic doctor. It was a very, very simple sheet. It was, if I remember correctly, it was baked potatoes and boiled onions and some greens. And that was a diet that I gave to all my patients to start off with. It was a diet that he gave me, very simple diet of potatoes and onions and greens. And I knew only two remedies in those early days. The one was kelp, which is seaweed, and the other is brewer's yeast. Now, kelp is full of minerals, and brewer's yeast is full of vitamin Bs. So that was the package that I started my practice with. And to my absolute astonishment, I started to see miracles happen. People with diabetes disappeared. People with rheumatoid arthritis, their arthritis disappeared. And to be quite honest, I was dumbfounded. I couldn't understand what was going on. Well, how come? I mean, I was a trained medical doctor. In fact, I was specializing in gastroenterology in the early days. How come that the simple diet with kelp and brewer's yeast could heal all these problems? I didn't know specific remedies like today. I can choose a whole lot of very specific natural remedies, but I knew nothing in those days. And then I had some acupuncture, which I learned over a weekend. So I knew very little acupuncture, but I started with acupuncture, and I was seeing miracles happen. Totally blew my mind away. and I couldn't understand what was happening. It took me a while to realize that what I was actually doing, because a lot of I was practicing in a farming community, and a lot of my very early patients were the farm workers that were coming to me, and these farm workers were eating junk food, and I was moving them from junk food to potatoes, onions, and greens. I spent some time with them. I was already then changing their story, and I gave them kelp and brewer's yeast. They were deficient in minerals. They were deficient in vitamin B's, uh, and just doing that simple things. All I was doing, if you see what I'm doing here, all I was doing was supporting health. I was changing their diet. I was giving them Brom's rule number one: change your story, telling them to be optimistic, and giving them brewer's yeast and kelp. That was all I needed to do. And to be quite honest, 30, 40 years later, I ended up doing something very similar. Uh, Simple stuff. You don't need to be, anybody can treat any condition with the simple principles that I'm talking about now. Change the patient's story, put them on a diet that is healthy. Now, we can discuss diets if you want to. And then give them a simple vitamin mineral supplement. Today, I've got special ones that I use that are high quality, but simple brewer's yeast and kelp, perfect stuff to start off with. And you will see 50% of your chronic diseases starting to disappear just by doing that.
And you did mention that, and we went into quite a lot of depth in the last podcast as well. But it's still fascinating that something so cost effective, right? I mean, it's not a very expensive diet, it's very affordable, even to farm workers, like you said, in South Africa, able to afford this type of diet. The junk food is probably more expensive, right? Because I know what junk food they eat. They probably buy like some chips, and they buy like a loaf of bread, and or they buy um, some gravy and a lot of Coke. So because I watch and I observe what people buy at the shops. So just changing from that, which is probably more expensive, to a very cost-effective diet, right? Just some greens, some kelp brewer's yeast. And when you mentioned brewer's yeast, I went to Google it because I never heard of this thing. And I found it's like a type of yeast, right, that brewers use in making alcohol, right? So that's why they call it brewer's yeast. But yeah, like you said, it's full of vitamin B's, and it helps because these people are deficient in vitamin B's. And the kelp is all your micronutrients and your minerals, your micro minerals. So the stuff that the body needs. So it's like you're just flushing the body with like all the nutrients that it's been craving. It's like doesn't have the pieces for so long to work, and it's like hobbling along and it's giving all these physiological symptoms, and then all of a sudden one day someone brings all the Lego pieces that you've been missing. You were trying to build your Lego with, but you had missed you had missing pieces, and then someone brings all the pieces, poof, and just dumps it on you. And the body knows what to do. Once you give the body these missing pieces that it's been crying out for, the body knows what to do, and it immediately, very quickly, starts putting those pieces in the right place, starts doing things, fixing things, getting rid of toxins. And once you deep it, once you deep and understand what's actually happening, and don't buy into the story that, hey, I've got a chronic illness, I'm diabetes, I'm going to be diabetic forever. That whole story, because that's the story I think the medical system wants you to believe. That's the story that they've convinced us is your destiny or your fate. If you come up with these physiological symptoms. I had a patient the other day that came to me. It was a little girl, and she'd been coughing, 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 coughing for years. Obviously, in winter time, her cough gets more severe. And then this winter, when they went to the doctors checked her and they said, "Okay, your daughter's got asthma." They're telling the parents, "Your daughter's got asthma. There's nothing we can do. Here's an asthma pump. Here's some asthma medication, and don't worry. Most kids get out of it by by 12 years old or something. But there's nothing we can do really." Anyway, they come to me, And I work with energy medicine, right? So it's great that you speak about this quantum stuff, because I don't make the physical medicine. I use frequency that I charge into certain pills using a radionics machine. And just by giving this pill, I gave a specific one for asthma, and I gave some frequencies to support the chest and to support other parts of the body. But within like 2-3 days, her cough stopped, and now it's been like a month. She's not coughed at all. Like her parents are dumbfounded, because this kid has been coughing for years, right? Years and years and years. And the doctors were like, "Nah, there's nothing we can do. Here's some physical symptom management stuff, inhaler, 2 inhalers. One, if it's very serious, you need to use this serious inhaler. But for, during the day, you can use this other low dosage inhaler. Here's the medication." Um, you know, that was their response. And it was also for me dumbfounding, because I'm not smart enough to really understand what is going on. What is actually happening? How did my little energy pills influence the energy body of this little girl to change her? Like, I don't understand. I'm just amazed and grateful that the universe works like this. But it's like so complex and so deep that this stuff is actually happening. And like you said, how much proof how much proof do we need? Isn't one just enough?
No, I'm just thinking, there is a physiological understanding around power. I mean, it says something like high power is destructive. When you weaken that power, it becomes irritating, and very low power stimulates. So the lower power stimulates, but the moment you start to increase power, the body resists it, and so you have to use more power. So you can take the laser, for example, which is a perfect example of it. High-powered lasers will cut through metal. A laser is only light. That's all it is. But high-power lasers will cut through metal, can cut through wood. When you weaken that power, it will become a little bit irritating. And when you go with low power, it stimulates healing. So I have a laser. This is a laser over here. And I use it because it's low powered laser. And we're not talking about low power laser. We're talking about 10 milliwatts. High power is 50 watts. 50 watts is used in surgery to make holes in the body and to cut the body. So high power is destructive. Low power stimulates healing. So if I speak to you quietly, you can listen to me. If I raise my voice, it becomes irritating. And if I shout at you, then we have a battle. It's the same principle right through. So homeopathy, low power, very low power. When you go to drugs, which is the other end, high power. Well, high power is destructive. It can be used to interfere with a function. That's what it's used for, because it's so high power. But low power, like homeopathy, stimulates healing. So the energy that you're using in the radionics is low power. Well, the fact is that the mind uses low power. And that's why mind over matter, we talk about mind over matter, it can work because it's low power. You don't need power always to interfere. I'm not saying there's no place for power. I mean, we have a world that's used power. It's a power world. And they can create and send spaceships to the moon. But we don't always need that. It's the body works with low energy, low power. And so that's why, we are always amazed at low power. How can low power make a difference? Well, the fact is, as I said, my hand going up is because of something happening in my head, which can hardly be measured, and yet it can make my hand go up. So low energy can influence matter. In fact, it's always influencing matter, because that's what I said. The controls are not in matter. The controls are in energy information, which is low power. So we need to understand that we live in a world that is sacred, a world that is soft. That's where the what can I say, the quality, the juiciness of it is. Not in high power, not in wars. I mean, what do wars do? They kill and they're destructive. That's high power. And I think that when we talk about feminine energy as opposed to masculine energy is this idea that somehow you need more power. And so the men are wanting to be in control and to run around the world and be destructive. Whereas the feminine energy is soft energy. It's the holding energy. It's the nourishing energy. So I'm not saying there's no place for the power, but we need to understand how to use it together. So when we're talking about healing medicine, sometimes we need high power. You need surgery. I'm not saying there's no place for surgery, but at the same time, we need to understand the soft power that is required as well. The loving, the compassion, the helping, the support. I mean, all those things are so much part of healing.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Low power is what can make huge impact in the physical world, and I've seen it so many times. I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't experienced this. And this patient that I gave this example is not the only one. I've seen it on countless patients, just by using low power radionics or Rife machine or some homeopathy um, tinctures. It can have profound effects combining. And like you said, this is where it's important, and this is where I've also seen the difference in patients, is combining it with a good diet and lifestyle, because I see that as different arrows that the patient can use. So one is eating better food, being more conscious of the food, getting the right nutrients, etc. Number two, your mind. That's another arrow. Well, I changed the order, but your story and your mind. Number three is the remedies, the radionics or homeopathy remedies. But doing all three is much more powerful, for example, than the patient. Some patients who have a bad lifestyle, they drink lots of coffee, they're eating lots of processed foods every day. And I tell them, please cut out caffeine, processed foods, lactose, gluten, cut these out because they're all stimulants. And also take these remedies. The patients that can't give up the lifestyle, I can see that the healing is a bit slower, right? If you keep on putting more junk and toxins and stimulants into the body daily, the the healing process, though it can be kickstarted, by these energy medicines, it can be kickstarted. It's very difficult. It's slower. It's definitely slower, and unless you change the lifestyle and the food intake and what the person is thinking, the healing can take longer. That's why I really appreciate that you said the first step is change the person's story, change their internal dialogue, change how they view themselves, and then you can start the, the steps. So, Dr. Brom, you gave us really good advice. Number one, step one, change the story or change your mental dialogue. Number two is a diet and lifestyle. Do you have a third step?
No, just to expand on the lifestyle, because lifestyle, of course, is first of all the food choices. Um, that's a big one. I'm not. I mean, people often ask me about food choices. My feeling is, and that's based on my 40 years of experience, that when you got a serious illness, uh, the first, I mean, I'm not a vegetarian, but my first choice is always a pure vegetarian diet for 1 or 2 months. My feeling is that the vegetables contain all the phytonutrients and all the energy that you need to have. They are the feminine side. Meat is a masculine side, and I think that there's a place for it, but not as a cleansing process. For me, cleansing is the herbal, and vegetarian foods are on the herbal side. So I usually ask people to do 1 to 3 months of a vegetarian diet, and to try and, if they can, to make it organic, but keep away all junk foods and wine and cigarettes and all that kind of thing. So that would be the food choices. The second is exercise, and exercise for me is so important. I don't think we realize how important exercise is, especially as you get older. you need to pay more attention to exercise, because young people are jumping around anyway. But as you get older, you really need to move. Um, I mean, I probably spend, I would say now, I'm 83, I probably spend a good hour a day just with exercises, different kind of exercises um, that I do in my room before I go downstairs. And then I do at least another 40 minutes of walking in the sand. We have a wetlands outside, and I walk in the sand, which is very important because it's unbalanced. It's not walking on the road. It's sand, and that keeps my balancing muscles in good order. So exercise is really, really important. Um, Stress management, we've already spoken about. That's changing the story, but stress management is really, really important. And sometimes you really need to ask about stress. People are so used to living with stress that they don't even know they're stressed. So to ask about stress and to try and open that conversation up, because for me it's important, to find out what is your background, what is your philosophy, um, what is your spiritual side. I need to have the language to speak to them, to help them change their story, to find out their background. So exercise and then sleep patterns are very important. Sleep is incredibly important. People don't realize it, but during the daytime we're dying. And that's why we say at the end of the day, I'm dead tired, because we're actually dying from the whole day. At nighttime, from a physical point of view, you come alive again. And that's why we wake up refreshed and ready to go with a good night's sleep. So during the night, we are rejuvenating the body. We are becoming alive again. The body says when you go to sleep, thank God the person's gone to sleep. Now we can clean up. So during the night, and all that is happening under the umbrella of melatonin. That's why melatonin is such an important remedy, especially as you get older, because your melatonin levels are falling. But under the umbrella of melatonin, I call melatonin a rejuvenator, because it's at nighttime the body is actually waking up and becoming alive again, and all the toxins are being removed during the nighttime. And that's why we feel refreshed in the morning. So sleep is really, really important. Um, so those are the basic things in lifestyle: is food choices, exercise, good sleep patterns, and stress management. Uh, after that, comes the various remedies that I choose. But again, I've come back to simplicity, and I would say that when I teach doctors, I tell them there are only a few remedies that you really need to have. And it's based on my first practice time when I gave people the potatoes and onions and bruises and kelp. It's a little bit more sophisticated today. But today, the one product that all of us need, I've never yet had a person in my practice that didn't need vitamin D. Vitamin D is not even a vitamin today. It's regarded as a hormone. The trouble is that everybody's been freaked out about getting the sun. I love sitting in the sun. I will try sitting in the sun for at least half an hour if I can, exposing as much of my skin to the sun. The sun is light. There's much more in the sun than just vitamin D, but the sunlight helps the body to make vitamin D, and vitamin D is takes part in hundreds of metabolic processes in the body. And while the normal vitamin D levels in this country are supposed to be anything over 30, the American Vitamin D Council says that it should be at least over 50. And I've never yet seen a person with levels over 50. I think everybody's afraid of, and especially in Europe, where they have only a short summer period, so everybody needs to take vitamin D, and at least 5,000 international units a day. So anywhere between 3 and 5,000 units, you need vitamin D levels. So everybody needs to take vitamin D, a major nutrient. Everybody needs to take a kind of vitamin mineral supplement of some sort. And then I think everybody should be taking the omega-3, because the trouble is that if we look at the things that are really, really destructive today, is your omega-6 oils. I, I am I really believe that if anything is causing an epidemic of chronic disease, it's excess omega-6s. And those excess omega-6s are most of your processed oils. Nobody should be buying oils in any shop that's sitting on the shelf, where the oils, it's not enclosed in dark spaces. I've looked up the way they process these oils. They go through about 12 different processes, adding chemicals and removing the chemicals and heating and cooling down, and then you get an oil which is totally sterile. It's got no life force. It has gone through so many chemical processes that it's actually dead. It's like a dead person. It's totally dead, the omega-6s. And omega-6s are highly inflammatory. They cause astonishing amount of inflammation in the body. And so much chronic disease today is due to inflammation. So we shouldn't be, the only oils we should be using are cold pressed oils, and the cold pressed oils like olive oil and coconut oil. Those are the basic ones that are cold pressed today, within the range of what we can afford. So, but even olive oil, these oils are highly fragile. If you got olive oil sitting in your kitchen, in the heat of the kitchen, on the window ledge where the sun is shining onto it, I promise you that olive oil is toxic within 3 months. So people are even using olive oil thinking that it's cold pressed and it's healthy. Well, if it's sitting next to your stove where the heat is, and it's in a jar that allows the light through, and you're leaving the cork open for oxygen to get in, well, that oil is dangerous. So I'm very cautious around oils. I like olive oil when it's freshly pressed for the first few months. If you can get it, that's the best oil, and that's really, really good quality oil. But if it's the oil has been a year old and you've been hanging it around and keeping the cork open, dangerous stuff. So most people are using omega-6 oils, which are not food. They think it's food, and they think it's unprocessed, even highly processed, very, very dangerous. So I think that the really bad foods today are your omega-6s and your excess sugars, that people are putting into their food. I think that those are the two foods that are seriously dangerous, and people use massive amounts of it. And on top of it, they're using these oils for frying, deep frying. And you're going to all these restaurants, poor quality restaurants, where they're using processed oils over and over and over again to fry food, deep fry food. That breaks my heart when I see people buying food like that. It's such poor quality, such dangerous. It's going to promote cancer in their body. So yeah. So for me, a good quality cleansing diet, and then the few remedies which are really necessary: omega-3, good quality omega-3, vitamin D's 3 to 5,000, and a good vitamin mineral supplement. That's a start that anybody can do to start off with and change their story.
So, Dr. Brom, as we're rounding off and finishing off our chat, and it's been so informative, I wanted to understand how you suggest treating the mind or the emotions that are out of balance. Because, like you said, a lot of people, you brought the examples of the different organs in the body, like the person who had the bladder infection, like asked him, who are you pissed off with? Because he's pissed off with something, someone. And that's the emotional imbalance that now manifests in the physical body. So, do you also help them with that? Like, do you also help with the emotions? Because where I was leading to, or what I wanted to ask you, is there's also a branch under homeopathy. I'm not sure if you heard of it. It's called the Bach flower remedies. And that specifically is on emotions. And I was just curious if you have any understanding or your opinion on how these flowers are able to go and somehow clean the emotions, or help with the emotional blockages or mental blockages. Um, yeah, it's just quite fascinating to see it work, because I've seen it work on a number of patients.
Yeah, no, you're going into an area of the unknown. I've just started a society called the Society to Investigate the Unknown and Unknowable. So we're getting into a little bit of the unknown, but the thing to do is the thing to understand here is that, let me think of a metaphor that I can maybe, the whole idea that this universe is the song of God. I mean, I love that image. The universe is the song of God. I've got the story of the Big Bang, that the Big Bang was God's eureka moment. At last I can make matter. God's eureka moment. At last I can make matter. So it's like in the Bible, it talks about the voice, the sound of God in the beginning. So if for me that image of God singing, breathing out, and the whole universe appearing, and then God breathing in and taking in the whole universe again, and then breathing out. So God is breathing out this universe constantly. The song of God going out there, and as that song goes out, it goes through various filters, and depending on the filter changes the equation, as it were, of that sound. It's like light going through a prism. Well, the prism changes the shape of the sound or the color. So we have filters. So God breathes out or sings his song, and it goes through various filters. And the filter then becomes so this takes the shape of the filter. The sound of God takes the shape of the filter. And that filter then has a certain signature tune. And that signature tune becomes the flowers that we see, or the plants that we see, or the human beings that we see. So, in that sense, if you can capture that sound at the earliest point of its development, it has the most. It is more pure. It's very pure then, before it gets more and more distorted by other filters. So when you do a Bach flower remedy or a homeopathic remedy, what you're actually doing is is reducing it back to its origins, or as close to the origins as you can, where it is most pure. And that is what the flower remedies are, or the homeopathic remedies are, or the energy tools, because you're moving away from matter towards where the controls are, towards the more pure version of that impetus. Am I making any sense here to you?
Yeah, you're making sense. I actually had another podcast sort of on a similar vibe about this last time, and the lady was talking about the original blueprint, the blueprint that has come from God or from Source. And then when you take these energy remedies, you're actually like reminding the body of the blueprint. The body may have forgotten the blueprint, but you're like, hey, here's the original designs. We found them, we dug them up from the basement. Here's the original designs of your system. And then when you give it to the body remembers sort of and knows what to do. It's like, oh, yes, I forgot these drawings. I didn't have them. I had this, altered drawings and altered blueprints. I didn't have the original one. So it sort of makes sense now that you're explaining it as a song, but it's still the same sort of an.
But Deepak, just also to add here, that to talk about a blueprint is what I call a map. It's not the territory. The territory is active. The territory is real. The territory is full of that beautiful sacredness of the sound of God, or the song of God. It carries the voice of God still. It's not just a blueprint in the way we make a design. No, 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 it's not that. It's actually a living. It's a life force. It's full of life force. So that's why when you talk about flower remedies, for me, it's carrying you. It's that's why it's sacred. because it's not just a blueprint like you can make a drawing, if you know what I mean. It's actually full of life. It carries life in it. It's a sacred bit of God's voice, if you want to call it that. And human beings are that as well. We are not just bodies. We are sacred beings. We carry within us the song of God, as it were, or the song of life force, whatever names you want to call it. That's why we are sacred, because we're not just bodies. And the whole concept of making us into bodies, a matter object, is so. It's. I'm trying to think of a word for it, but it's not okay. It's really not okay to be reducing the human being to a body with a problem. It's much more bigger. It's much more sacred. It's much more awesome. It's much more, yeah, it's breathtaking, actually, who we are. And we need to understand that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, Dr. Brom, we have come to the end of our show, and I think we've covered quite a bit of useful intel for the people to think about and hopefully change their ways. They're simple things, simple techniques. You don't have to invest a lot of money, and you can really change the trajectory of your life, right? And this is what this whole show and podcast is about, using ancient knowledge to enhance your present day life. So, Dr. Brom, we really appreciate your time. We thank you very much, and we look forward to chatting again in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you, Deepak. Take care.